Hi, my name is Melissa Hendershot, and I'm a graduate student at UCSF. Today, I'm here with Chris Garcia, who's a professor and Howard Hughes medical investigator at Stanford University. Chris is a dedicated professor, but he also has spent thousands of hours training for and running ultramarathons. So, welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, can you just tell us a little bit about what an ultramarathon is and what that entails?
Technically, an ultramarathon is any distance race longer than a marathon. So ultramarathons can be anything from 50 kilometers, which is a pretty popular distance, to 100 miles. And, there are races in between 50 milers, 100 Ks. So that's what defines an ultramarathon.
When did you first start running seriously?
Well, I was always an athlete. I was a tennis player growing up, a pretty serious tennis player. And then in graduate school, I started running, and I started running marathons on the East Coast, and actually rode a single scull for a while when I was in graduate school. And then when I moved to California for my postdoc, I started getting more serious about running and doing triathlons. And I did a lot of triathlons when I was in San Diego for my postdoc at Scripps, and I'd always heard about ultramarathons, and I'd always had a predilection for distance, and so I knew that ultramarathons were a big thing in the Bay Area, but like 15 years ago when I was just hearing about them, they weren't as popular as they are now, so it was kind of an urban myth. These races where people would run 100 miles, and so that's and so that I felt like that was something that I could potentially be decent at, and kind of escalated from there.
What was your first ultra?
So my first ultra was actually a postdoc in my lab had run some ultras, and she got me to sign up with her to run a race in the Marin Headlands called the Marin 50K, and it's through the headlands, and it was through the trails, and it was almost like an out-of-body experience. It was just running through the fog over there, and along the coastal trail, and through the rainforests, and it was, from the first time I ever did it, that was it. I was hooked, and that was almost 12 years ago.
How many ultramarathons have you done? Do you know?
Yeah, I've done a total of 80 or 82 or something like that, and amongst those 80 some races, I think I've run like 1,300 milers, probably 25 or 30 50 milers, and 10 or so 100 Ks, and then a lot of 50 Ks. So kind of the very long distance races you run fewer of because your body just can't take that many.
How do you train for the races?
So during the week, I do normal distances. I'll run 6 or 7 miles, maybe four times a week. And I actually do a lot of cross training. I swim a lot. I swim with Stanford Masters team a lot in the mornings. And I also cycle a lot. And so I have like a 25-mile loop I do to get to work, just to sort of take the pounding off my body. But then on weekends, there's usually a long Saturday run that's anywhere from 20 to 30 miles with a group of people I've been running with for a long time. They're great friends, and a big part of why I'm doing this, and that's a Saturday morning staple. And then as we're sort of ramping up into race season now, you'll back it up again on Sunday with maybe like a 15 or 20 mile run. So the key to doing ultra is the long run, and the long run can be anywhere from 20 to 40 miles, and then backing it up with a long run the next day. And so it comes in large chunks, and so for me, going into a 100-miler, I might max out at like an 80 or 90-mile week for a few weeks, but average total maybe 60 or 70 miles a week. Some people run 150 miles a week. The real elite ultra runners, will run 150, 200 miles a week. Some people can get away with less, and so it's a very individual thing.
How do you manage to push yourself past the feelings of discomfort and unhappiness?
Yeah, that's a good question. You just keep going. You realize, when you first start doing these races, you really doubt what you can do, and you fear failure. But then with enough experience, you realize that you can get past those bad patches when you're just completely, you just can't go on. That you can, if you understand your nutrition well enough, and you know how to manage yourself, hydrate yourself, and you have the confidence, you've gone those longer distances before, you can push yourself through it and you recover. It's amazing in these races how many times you go to complete failure and you recover, and then you're running along just as if you started running, 10 minutes ago. And so it's a constant sort of cycle of ups and downs in these races.
What sorts of things do you think about when you're running?
It's interesting. When I'm running just for training, or, in the afternoon here at Stanford, and like out here, I'm usually thinking about problems in the lab, science, projects, issues with people, managing projects. But then when you run far enough, your mind goes blank and you don't really think about anything. You just you don't have enough glucose in your brain to think. And people ask me, what do you think about during a 100-mile race when you're out there for a day? Do you get bored? And it's amazing how fast these things go. I mean, I barely remember anything that happens in these races. You're just kind of in survival mode, and you're thinking about managing yourself and your nutrition, and so you're so in the moment, and you're not thinking about anything else except just maximizing how good you feel.
Have you ever had a scientific breakthrough moment while you've been out running on the trail?
Yeah, actually, a lot of them. I've had a lot of ideas for projects, usually early in the run. And I remember very distinctly when I was an assistant professor, we were trying to solve a crystal structure that had a very complex packing and symmetry problem. And we were banging on the thing for a week or two, and the project took longer than that. But once we had phases, we were staring at the graphics and we couldn't figure out the symmetry of the thing. And I took a run around Stanford, and I solved the problem in my head. It just came to me. It just kind of percolated up. And so, stuff like that happens all the time.
How have you found ways to balance having both a demanding profession and a pretty demanding hobby?
Well, I'm very disciplined with my time, and I don't have a lot of free time. I'm usually doing one of two things. I'm either working or I'm out training, and I get up at 4 a.m. and I work for a while, and then I swim, and then usually then I go to work, and then I go to lab, and then later in the afternoon I usually do another training session, and then go back to lab, and then go home. And I don't get a lot of sleep, and I enjoy it. I mean, I love it. I love the immersion. I love my life, and there's not a lot of tolerance. The tolerances are pretty fine between the stuff I'm doing, and I always feel like it's on the verge of blowing up. But I feel very fortunate. There's so many things I want to do that it's difficult to find enough time in the day often.
Do you see any parallels between running ultramarathons and running a lab, or any skills that you've acquired through your racing that have helped you as a PI?
Definitely. It's been enormously helpful. I mean, just athletics in general has a lot of lessons to learn about doing science, and there's a physicality to science that I think people tend to underestimate, that you need to be able to push yourself through barriers to keep going on hard scientific problems. And ultra teaches a lot of lessons about humility and stoicism, staying within oneself and being in the moment. It's had a great pacifying influence on me, for sure. And also having the long view. Science, if you're working on hard scientific problems or any sort of important scientific problem, it's generally going to be a long-term problem. And you have to have the patience and the foresight to understand that the payoff is in the future, it's in the distance. And it's also in the process of doing the science. It's not just in the reward. So Ultra has, I think, the same kinds of lessons to teach that about enjoying the process, learning from the process, and having the long view and having the confidence that you can get there if you just persist.